I look back to that summer and can't believe that despite every one of my efforts to live with the fire and the swoon, life still granted wonderful moments. Italy, summer, the noise of the cicadas in the early afternoon. My room, his room, or balcony that shut the whole world out. The soft wine trailing exhalation from our garden up the stairs to my bedroom. This summer I learned to love fishing because he did. To love jogging because he did. To love Octopus, Heraclitus, Tristan. This summer I'd heard a bird sing, smell a planet, or feel the mist rise from under my feet on warm sunny days, and because my senses were always on alert, would automatically find them rushing to him. I could have denied so many things that I longed to touch his knees and wrists when they glistened in the sun with that viscous sheen I've seen in so very few. That I loved how his white tennis shirts seemed perpetually stained by the color of clay, which, as the weeks wore on, became the color of his skin. That his hair turning blonder every day. Couch the sun before the sun was completely out in the morning, that his bluish shirt becoming ever more blowy when he wore it on gusty days on a patio by the pool. Promise to harbour scant of skin and sweat that made me hard just thinking of it. All this I could have denied and believed my denials. But it was the gold necklace and the Star of David with a golden on his neck that told me here was something more compelling than anything I wanted from him. For it bound us and reminded me that while everything else conspired to make us the two most dissimilar beings, this is at least transcended all differences. I saw his star almost immediately during his first day with us. And from that moment on, I knew that what mystified me and made me want to seek out his friendship, without ever hoping to find ways to dislike him, was larger than anything either of us could ever want from the other. Larger and therefore better than his soul. My body on earth itself. Staring at his neck with its star and telltale amulet was like staring at something timeless, ancestral, immortal in me, immortal in him, in both of us, begging to be rekindled and brought back from its millenary sleep. What baffled me was that he didn't seem to care or notice that I were one too, just as he probably didn't care or notice each time my eyes wandered along his bathing suite and tried to make out the contour of what made us brothers in the desert. With the exception of my family, he was probably the only other Jew who had ever set foot in B. But unlike us, he let you see it from the very start. We were not conspicuous Jewish, we were or Judaism, as people do almost everywhere in the world. Under the shirt, not hidden, but tucked away. Jewish of discretion. To use my mother's word, to see someone proclaim his Judaism on his neck as Oliver did when he grabbed one of our bikes and headed into town with his shirt wide open, shocked us as much as it taught us we could do the same and get away with it. I tried imitating him a few times, but I was too self-conscious, like someone trying to feel natural while walking about naked in a locker, only to end up aroused by his own nakedness. In town, I tried flaunting my Judaism with the silent bluster that comes less arrogance that from repressed shame. Not him, it's not that he never thought about being Jewish or about the life of Jewish in Catholic country. Sometimes we spoke about just this topic during those long afternoons when both of us would put aside work and enjoy chatting while the entire household and guests has all drifted into every available bedroom to rest for a few hours. He had lived long enough in small towns in New England to know what it felt like to beat the other Jews out. But Judaism never troubled him the way it troubled me, nor was it the subject of an abiding, metaphysical discomfort with himself and the world. It did not even harbor the mystical, unspoken promises of redemptive brotherhood. And perhaps this was why he wasn't ill at ease with being Jewish and didn't constantly have to pick at it, the way children pick at scabs they wish would go away. He was okay with being Jewish. He was okay with himself, the way he was okay with his body, with his looks, with his antique backhand, with his choice of books, music, films, and friends. He was okay with losing his prize Mont Blanc pen. I can buy another one just like that. He was okay with criticism too. He showed my father a few pages he was proud of having written. My father told him his insight into Heraclitus were brilliant, but needed firming up. That he needed to accept the paradoxical nature of the philosopher's thinking, not simply explain it away. He was okay with firming things up. He was okay with paradox. Back to the drawing board, he was okay with the drawing boards as well. He invited my young aunt for a theety midnight gita Spain, in or motorboat. She declined. That was okay. He tried again a few days later, was turned down again, and again made light of it. She too was okay with it. and had she spent another week with us, would probably have been okay with going out to sea for a midnight gita that could easily have lasted till sunrise. Only once during his very first few days did I get the sense that this willful but accommodating laid-back water over my back, unflappable, unfazed 24-years-old who was so heedlessly okay with so many things in life was, in fact, a thoroughly alert, cold, sagacious judge of character and the situation. Nothing he did or said was unpremeditated. He saw through everybody, but he saw through them precisely because the first thing he looked for in people was the very thing he had seen in himself and may not have wished others to see. He was, as my mother was scandalized to learn one day, a supreme poker player who'd escape into town at night twice a week or so to play a few hands. This was why, to our complete surprise, he had insisted on opening a bank account on the very day of his arrival. None of our residents had ever had a local bank account. Most didn't have a penny. It had happened during a lunch that my father had invited a journalist who had dabbled in philosophy in his youth and wanted to show that, though he had never written about Heraclitus, he could still spare on any matter under the sun. He and Oliver didn't hit it off. Afterwards, my father had said, "A very witty man, damn clever too." "Do you really think so, Prue?" Oliver interrupted, unaware that my father, while very easy-going himself, did not always like being contradicted, much less being called Prue. So he went along with both. "Yes, I do," insisted my father. "Well, I'm not sure I agree at all. I find him arrogant, dull, flat-footed, and coarse. He uses humor and a lot of voice." Oliver mimicked the man's gravitas and broad gesture to nudge his audience because he is totally incapable of arguing a case. "The voice thing is so over the top, Pro. People laugh at his humor not because he is funny, but because he telegraphs his desire to be funny. His humor is nothing more than a way of winning over people he can't pursue. If you look at him when you are speaking, he always looks away. He is not listening, he is just itching to say things he's rehearsed while you were speaking and wants to say before he forgets them." How could anyone intuit the manner of someone thinking unless he himself was already familiar with this same mood of thinking? How could he perceive so many devilish turns in others unless he had practiced them himself? What struck me was not just his amazing gift for reading people, for rummaging inside them and digging out the precise configuration of their personality, but his ability to intuit things in exactly the way I myself might have intuited them. This, in the end, was what drew me to him with a compulsion that overrode desire or friendship. Of a common religion, how about catching a movie? He blurted out one evening when we were all sitting together, as if he'd suddenly hit on a solution to what promised to be a dull night indoors. We had just left the dinner table where my father, as was his habit these days, had been urging me to try to go out with friends more often, especially in the evening. It bordered on a lecture. Oliver was still new with us and no one in town. So I must have seemed as good a movie partner as any, but he had asked his question in far too breezy and spontaneous a manner, as though he wanted me and everyone else in the living room to know that he was heartily invested in going to the movies and could just as readily stay home and go over his manuscript. The carefree inflection of his offer, however, was also a wink aimed at my father. He was only pretending to have come up with the idea, in fact, without letting me suspect it. He was picking up on my father's advice at the dinner table and was offering to go for my benefit alone. I smiled, not at the offer, but at the double-edged maneuver. He immediately caught my smile, and having caught it, smiled back almost in self-mockery, sensing that if he gave any sign of guessing, I'd seen through his ruse. He'd be confirming his guilt, but that refusing to own up to it after I made clear I'd intercepted it would indict him even more, so he smiled to confess he'd been caught, but also to show he was a good enough sport to own up to it and still enjoy going to the movies together. The whole thing thrilled me, or perhaps his smile was his way of countering my reading thirst for that with the honest suggestion that, much as he'd been caught trying to affect total casualness on the face of his offer, he too had found something to smile about in me, namely the shrewd, guilty pleasure I derived in finding so many imperceptible affinities between us. There may have been nothing there, and I might have invented the whole thing, but both of us know what the other had seen. That evening, as we biked to the movie theater, I was, and I didn't care to hide it, riding on air. So, with so much insight, would he not have noticed the meaning behind my abrupt shrinking away from his hand? Not notice that I leaned into the grip, not know that I didn't want him to let go of me, not sense that when he started massaging me, my inability to relax was my last refuge, my last defense, my last pretense that I had by no means resist, that mine was fake resistance, that I was incapable of resisting and would never want to resist. no matter what he did or asked me to do. Not know, as I sat on my bed that Sunday afternoon when no one was home except for the two of us, and watch him enter my room and ask me why I wasn't with the other at the beach. That if I refused to answer and simply shrugged my shoulders under his gaze, it was simply so as not to show that I couldn't gather sufficient breath to speak, that if I so much as let out a sound it might be to either a desperate confession or a sob, one or the other. Never since childhood had anyone brought me to such a pass. A bad allergy, I'd said. Me too, he replied. We probably have the same one. Again I shrugged my shoulders. He picked up my old teddy bear in one hand, turned its face towards him, and whispered something into its ear. Then turning the teddy's face to me and altering his voice asked, "What's wrong? You are upset." By then he must have noticed the bathing suit I was wearing. Was I wearing it lower than was the sand? "Want to go for a swim?" he asked. "Later, maybe," I said, echoing his word but also trying to say as little as possible. Before he spoke, I was out of breath. "Let's go now." He extended his hand to help me get up. I grabbed it and, turning on my side facing the wall away from him, to prevent him from seeing me, I asked, "Must we?" This was the closest I would ever come to saying, "Stay, just stay with me. Let your hands travel wherever it wishes. Take my suit off. Take me, I won't make a noise, won't tell a soul. I'm hard and you know it. And if you won't, I'll take that hand of yours and slip it into my suit now and let you put as many fingers as you want inside me." He wouldn't have picked up on any of this. He said he was going to change and walk out of my room. "I'll meet you downstairs." When I looked at my crotch, to my complete dismay, I saw it was damp. Had he seen it? Surely he must have. That's why he wanted us to go to the beach. That's why he walked out of my room. I hit my head with my fist. How could I have been so careless? So thoughtless, so totally stupid. Of course he'd seen. I should have learned to do what he'd have done. Shrugged my shoulders and been okay with pre-com. But that wasn't me. It would never have occurred to me to say, "So what if he saw?" No, he knows. What never crossed my mind was that someone else who lived under our roof, who played cards with my mother, ate breakfast and supper at our table, recited the Hebrew blessing on Friday for the sheer fun of it, slept in one of our beds, used our towels, shared our friends, watched TV with us on rainy days, when we sat in the living room with a blanket around us because it got cold and we felt so snug being all together, and we listened to the rain patter against the window, that someone else in my immediate world might like what I liked, want what I wanted, be who I was. It would never have entered my mind because I was still under the illusion that, bearing what I'd read in books, inferred from rumors, and overheard in bawdy talk all over, no one my age had ever wanted to be both man and woman. With men and women I had wanted other men my age before and had slept with a woman. But before he'd stepped out of the cab and walked into our home, it would never have seemed remotely possible that someone so thoroughly okay with himself might want me to share his body as much as I aged to yield up mine. And yet, about 2 weeks after his arrival, all I wanted every night was for him to leave his room, not via its front door, but through the French windows on our balcony. I wanted to hear his windows open, and then the sound of my own window, which was never locked, being pushed open as he stepped in my room after everyone had gone to bed. Sleep under my covers, undress me without asking, and after making me want him more than I thought I could ever want another living soul, gently, softly, and with the kindness one Jew extends to another, work his way into my body, gently and softly. After hearing the words I've been rehearsing for days now, please don't hurt me, which meant hurt me all you want, I seldom stayed in my room during the day. Instead, for the past summers I had appropriated a round table with an umbrella, the back garden by the pool. Powell, our previous summer resident, had liked working in his room, occasionally stepping out onto the balcony to get a glimpse of the sea or smoke a cigarette. Maynard before him had also worked in his room. Oliver needed company. He began by sharing my table, but eventually grew to like throwing a large sheet on the grass and lying on it, flanked by loose pages of his manuscript and what he liked to call his things: lemonade, suntan lotion, books, sunglasses, colored pens, and music, which he listened to with headphones, so that it was impossible to speak to him unless he was speaking to you first. Sometimes when I came downstairs with my scorebook or other books in the morning, he was already sprawled in the sun wearing his red or yellow bathing suit and sweating. We'd go jogging or swimming and return to find the breakfast waiting for us. Then He got in a habit of leaving his things on the grass and lying right on the tiled edge of the pool called heaven. Short for "this is heaven," as he often said after lunch. "I'm going to heaven now," adding, as an inside joke among Latins, to apprecate, we would tease him about the countless hours he would spend soaking in suntan lotion as he lay on the same exact spot along the pool. "How long were you in heaven this morning?" my mother would ask. 2 straight hours, but I plan to return early this afternoon for a much longer application. Going to the Isle of Paradise also meant lying on his back along the edge of the pool with one leg dangling in the water, wearing his headphones and his straw hat flat on his face. Here was someone who lacked for nothing. I couldn't understand his feelings. I envied him. "Oliver, are you sleeping?" I would ask when the air by the pool had grown oppressively turbid and quiet. Silence, then his reply would come, almost a sigh without a single muscle moving in his body. I was. Sorry. That fruit in the water, I could have kissed every toe on it. Then kissed his ankles and his knees. How often had I stared at his bathing suit while his hat was covering his face. He couldn't possibly have known what I was looking at. Or, "Oliver, are you sleeping?" Long silence. No, thinking. About what? His toes flicking the water. About Heidegger's interpretation of the fragment by Heraclitus. Or when I wasn't practicing the guitar and he wasn't listening to his headphones, still with his straw hat flat on his face, he would suddenly break the silence. "Elio." "Yes." "What are you doing?" "Reading." "No, you are not." "Thinking then." "About?" I was dying to tell him. "Private," I replied. "So you won't tell me?" "So I won't tell you." "So he won't tell me," he repeated, pensively, as if explaining to someone about me. How I loved the way he repeated what I myself had just repeated. It made me think of the chaos, or of a gesture, which happens to be totally accidental the first time, but becomes intentional the second time, and more so yet the third. It reminded me of the way Mafalda would make my bed every morning, first by folding the top sheet over the blanket, then by folding the sheet back again to cover the pillows on top of the blanket. And once more yet, when she folded the whole thing over the bedspread, back and forth, until I know that tucked in between these multiple folds were tokens of something at once peace and indulgent, like acquiescence in an instant of passion. Silence was always light and unobtrusive of those afternoons. I'm not telling, I said. Then I'm going back to sleep, he'd said. My heart was racing. He must have known. Profound silence again. Moments later, this is heaven. And I wouldn't hear him say another word for at least an hour. There was nothing I loved more in life than to sit at my table and pore over my transcriptions while he lay on his belly marking pages he'd pick up every morning from Signora Milani, his translator in B. Listen to this, he'd sometimes say, removing his headphones, breaking the oppressive silence of those long, sweltering summer mornings. Just listen to this trivial. And he'd proceed to read aloud something he couldn't believe he had written months earlier. Does it make any sense to you? Not to me. Maybe it did when he wrote it. I said. He thought for a while as though weighting my words. That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in months. Spoken ever so earnestly, as if he was bit by a sudden revelation and was taking what I said to mean much more than I thought it did. I felt ill at ease, looked away, and finally muttered the first thing that came to my mind. Kind? I asked. Yes, kind. I didn't know what kindness had to do with it, or perhaps I wasn't seeing clearly enough where all this was hidden and preferred to let the matter slide. Silence again until the next time he'd speak. How I loved it when he broke the silence between us to say something. Anything, or to ask what I thought about something, or had I ever heard of something. Nobody in our household ever asked my opinion about anything if he hadn't already figured out why he would soon enough. It was only a matter of time before he fell in with everyone's view that I was the baby of the family. And yet here he was in his third week with us, asking me if I'd ever heard of Athanasius Kircher and Paul Celan. I have. I am almost a decade older than you are, and until a few days ago had never heard of any of them. I don't get it. What's not to get? That's a university professor. I grew up without TV. Get it now? Go back to your plunking, will you? He said as though crumpling a towel and throwing it at my face. I even liked the way he told me off. One day, while moving my notebook on the table, I accidentally tripped over my glass. It fell on the grass, it didn't break. Oliver, who was close by, got up, picked it up, and placed it, not just on the table, but right next to my page. I didn't know where to find the words to thank him. You didn't have to, I finally said. He let just enough time go by for me to register that his answer might not be casual or carefree. I wanted to. He wanted to, I thought. I imagined him repeating, kind, complacent, effusive as he was when the mood would suddenly strike him. To me, those hours spent at that round wooden table in our garden, with the large umbrella imperfectly shading my papers, the chinking of our iced lemonades, the sound of the note to the stand served gently, lapping the giant rock below. And in the background, from some neighboring house, the muffled crackle of the heat parrot medley on perpetual reply. All this all forever impressed on those mornings when all I prayed for was for time to stop. Let summer never end, let him never go away. Let the music on perpetual replay plays forever. I am asking for a very little, and I swear I'll ask for nothing more. What did I want, and why couldn't I know what I wanted? Even when I was perfectly ready to be brutal in my admission. Perhaps the very least I wanted was for him to tell me that there was nothing wrong with me, that I was no less human than any other young man my age. I would have been satisfied and asked for nothing else than if he'd bent down and picked up the dignity I could so effortlessly have thrown at his feet. I was Glaucus and he was Diomedes, in the name of some obscure cult among men. I was giving him my golden armor from his bronze, fair exchange, neither haggled, just as neither spoke of thrift or extravagance. Then the word friendship came to my mind. But friendship, as defined by everyone, was a line, follow stuff I cared nothing for. What I may have wanted instead, from the moment he stepped out of the cab to our farewell in Rome, was what all humans ask of one another. What makes life livable, it would have to come from him first, then possibly from me. There is a law somewhere that says that when one person is thoroughly smitten with the other must unavoidably be smitten as well. Amercha Nual Mota Amar Perdona. Love, which exempts no one who's loved from loving. Francesca whirls in the inferno, just wait and be hopeful. I was hopeful, though perhaps this was what I had wanted all along. To wait forever. As I sat there working on transcription at my round table in the morning, what I would have settled for was not his friendship. Not anything, just to look up and find him there. Suntan lotion, straw that, reed bathing suit, lemonade. To look up and find you there, Oliver. For the day will come soon enough when I looked up and you'll no longer be there. By late morning, friends and neighbors from adjoining houses frequently drop in. Everyone would gather in our garden and then herd out together to the bench below. Our house was the closest to the water, and all you needed was to open the tiny gate by the balustrade, take the narrow stairway down the bluff, and you were on the rocks. Chiara, one of the girls who 3 years ago was shorter than I and who just last summer couldn't leave me alone, had now blossomed into a woman who had finally mastered the art of not always greeting me whenever we met. Once she and her younger sister dropped in with the rest, picked Oliver's shirt on the grass, threw it at him and said, "Enough, we are going to the beach and you are coming." He was willing to oblige. "Let me just put away these papers." Otherwise his father, and with his hands carrying papers, he used his chin to point at me, "will skin me alive." Talking about skin, come here, she said, and with her fingernails gently and slowly tried to pull a silver of peeling skin from his tanned shoulders, which had acquired the light golden hue of a wheat field in a late June. How I wished I could do that. Tell his father that, crumpled his papers. See what he says then. Looking over his manuscript, which Oliver had left on the large dining table on his way upstairs, Chiara shouted from below that she could do a better job translating this page than the local translator. A child of expert like me, Chiara had an Italian mother and an American father. She spoke English and Italian with both. "Do you type good too?" came his voice from upstairs as he rummaged for another bathing suit in his bedroom. Then in a shower, doors slamming, drawers thudding, shoes kicked. "I type good," she shouted, looking up into the empty stairwell. As good as you speak good. Better, and I gave you a better price too. Actually, I need 5 pages translated per day to be ready for pick up every morning. Then I won't do none for you, snapped Kiara. Find yourself somebody else. Well, Signora Milani needs the money, he said, coming downstairs, billowy blue shirt, spatterless red trunks, sunglasses, and the red loop edition of Lucretius that never left his side. I'm okay with her, he said as he rubbed some lotion on his shoulders. I'm okay with her, Kiara said, tittering. I'm okay with you, you are okay with me, she's okay with him. Stop clowning and let's go swimming, said Kiara's sister. It took me a while to realize 4 personalities depending on which bathing suit he was wearing. Knowing which to expect gave me the illusion of a slight advantage. Red Bolt sat in his ways, very grown-up, almond gruff, and ill-tempered. Stay away. Yellow, sprightly, funny, not without barbs. Don't give in too easily. Might turn to red in no time. Green, which he seldom wore. Eager to learn, eager to speak. Sunny, why wasn't he always like this? Blue, the afternoon he stepped into my room from the balcony, the day he massaged my shoulders, or when he picked up my glass and placed it right next to me. Today was red. He was hasty, determined, snappy. On his way out, he grabbed an apple from a large bowl of fruit, uttered a cheerful later, Miss P, to my mother, who was sitting with 2 friends in the shade. All 3 of them in bathing suit, and rather than open the gate to the narrow stairway leading to the rocks. Jump over it. None of your summer guests had ever been as freewheeling. But everyone loved him for it, the way everyone grew to love later. Okay, Oliver, later, okay? Said my mother, trying to speak his lingo, having even grown to accept her new title as Miss P. There was always something abrupt about the world. It wasn't see you later, or take care now, or even ciao. Later was a chilling, slam-dunk salutation that showed aside all or honeyed European niceties. Later always left a sharp aftertaste to what until then may have been a warm hearth-to-hearth moment. Later didn't close things neatly or allow them to trail off. It slammed them shut. But later was also a way of avoiding saying goodbye, of making light of all goodbyes. You said later, not to mean farewell, but to say you'd be back in no time. It was the equivalent of his saying just a sec when my mother once asked him to pass the bird and he always busy pulling apart the fish bones on his plate. Just a sec. My mother, who hated what she called his Americanisms, ended up calling him Il Corbu The Cowboy. It started as a put-down and soon enough became an endearment to go along with her other nickname for him. Comfort during his first week, when he came down to the dinner table after showering, his glistening hair come back. La Star, she had said, short for La Movie Star, my father always the most indulgent among us, but also the most observant, had figured the caveat. He's shy, that's why, he said when asked to explain Oliver, abrasive later. Oliver Timidul, that was new. Could all of his gruff Americanism be nothing more than an exaggerated way of covering up the simple fact that he didn't know? Unfeared, he didn't know how to take his leave gracefully. It reminded me of how for days he had refused to eat soft-boiled eggs in the morning. By the third or fifth day, Mafalda insisted he couldn't leave the region without tasting our eggs. He finally consented, only to admit with a touch of genuine embarrassment that he never bothered to conceal, that he didn't know how to open a soft-boiled egg. Lasky Faramel, Signor Oliva, leave it to me, she said. From that morning and well into his stay with us, she would bring Olivia 2 eggs and stop serving everyone until she had sliced open the shell of both his egg. Did he perhaps want a third? She asked. Some people liked more than 2 eggs. No, 2 would do, he replied, and turning to my parents, add, I know myself, if I have a 3, I'll have a 4 and more. I had never heard someone his age said. Know myself, it intimidated me. But she had been won over well before, on his 3rd morning with us, when she asked him if he liked juice in the morning. And he said yes, he was probably accepting orange or grapefruit juice. What he got was a large glass filled to the rim with thick apricot juice. He had never had apricot juice in his life. She stood facing him with her salvet flat against her apron, trying to make out his reaction as he quaffed it down. He said nothing at first, then probably without thinking, he smacked his lips. She was in heaven. My mother couldn't believe that people who taught at world-famous universities smacked their lips after downing apricot juice. From that day on, a glass of the stuff was waiting for him every morning. He was baffled to know that apricot trees existed in, of all places, or orchard. On a late afternoon, when there was nothing to do in the house, Mafalda would ask him to climb a ladder with a basket and pick those fruits that were almost blushing with shame, she said. He would joke in Italy and pick one out and ask, is this one blushing with shame? No, she would say. This one is too young still. Youth has no shame. Shame comes with age. I shall never forget watching him from my table as he climbed a small ladder, wearing his red bathing trunks, taking forever to pick the ripest apricots. On his way to kitchen, wicker basket, spadris, billowy shirt, suntan lotion, and all he threw me a very large one, saying yours. This video is taken for Navid Daria's page